The sign out front at the head coach hotel reads no vacancies, but there's plenty of traffic down Assistant Coach Boulevard. Plus, we'll talk awards before diving into a great Super Bowl matchup. It's coming your way now on the Grey Duck NFL Show. Welcome once again to the Grey Duck NFL Show, where we have got you covered all around the league. I'm your host, Josh Kolodziejski, and we've got the day of the year finally here. It's Super Bowl Sunday, under 48 hours from now when we're recording this late on Friday night. And we're going to dive into that matchup between the Seattle Seahawks and the New England Patriots, a rematch of one of the greatest games ever played out here in Glendale, Arizona, where I'm in just a couple of years ago, 11 years ago. So those two teams will be matching up, but we've got some other business to talk about first before we dive into the X's and O's and give our predictions for the big game. And we'll get it started right away with some more clerical work. We mentioned it at the top of this show that yes, all head coaching vacancies are full, but that does not mean the coaching carousel has come to a complete stop, because we have a ton of assistant coach movement. Some of that is because certain coordinators left their current jobs to get a head coaching job. Some of it is a little bit of saltiness by some coordinators who may have been passed over for jobs or don't like where the franchise is headed, don't like that direction. So we'll get into that right now. And the one that broke today was that Cliff Kingsbury, the former Arizona Cardinals head coach and the former Washington Commanders offensive coordinator, is going to take a job with the Los Angeles Rams for the 2026 season in the Sean McVay Rehabilitation Clinic, where he is going to learn under the master of the modern NFL offense and see how to incorporate his thoughts and his system into the Kingsbury system, which had been kind of a major, it was a good spread offense system at the time when he entered the league, but the league has now gone away from that, shifted away from that. And Cliff Kingsbury will not be the offensive coordinator, will not be, I don't even think a positions coach, but he's going to be an assistant, a consultant, whatever the word is, whatever the vague term is, for a guy that's basically going to be interning at SoFi Stadium so that he can learn the ins and outs and be better prepared to hold down a long-term offensive coordinator job or long-term head coaching job once he leaves the Rams at the end of the year. We kind of saw this with Brian Flores in Pittsburgh. He took a job as their linebackers coach for a year before getting his name back in the ring for defensive coordinator positions, which led him to the Minnesota Vikings. And even though he hasn't gotten a head coaching job off of that just yet, his name has been a big one in the head coaching cycle each of the last 2 years, just coming up empty both sides. And there's also the whole lawsuit against the NFL thing, which is probably putting him in the cross-off list right away for some of these NFL owners. But Cliff Kingsbury gets a fantastic opportunity. He was once known as that one of those young, brilliant offensive minds that I think we probably throw around a little bit too liberally. We say that pretty much anyone whose offense scores 30 points per game for one season is one of those young, great offensive head coaching minds. But Cliff Kingsbury really was. He ran like an air raid spread offense attack where there was passing, along with a lot of quarterback draws, and it was basically just use 4 wide receivers to spread out the defense and then let your quarterback go to work. That opens up lanes in the running game. It lightens the box in the running game. And it opens up, perhaps, opportunities if you have a running quarterback, which Cliff Kingsbury has had now twice with Kyler Murray and Jaden Daniels. It allows them more space to work with if they do decide to tuck and run. However, the NFL defense has responded by taking away a lot of the middle, using a lot more match coverages, using a lot more rotation coverages, where they show you a 2-high look and then rotate into a 1-high look, and then you're looking at the cornerbacks to see if that 1-high look is a cover 1 or a cover 3, and then by the time you figured that out, it is your quarterback sacked. So the old system of trying to read defenses, and Kirk Cousins put this brilliantly earlier in the season and can probably sum it up better than I can, but the old system of looking at the shell coverage and then deciding one half of the field to look at based on that shell coverage and based on your knowledge of the route concepts on that side of the field, and then seeing if that defender does what you think he's going to do. That was kind of how you read defenses in the olden days. It's only a half decade ago, but the olden days in Cliff Kingsbury's time when he was coming up to be a head coach. And Kirk Cousins talked about how now it kind of has gone to pure progressions where you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to all 5 of your eligible receivers in a way that makes sense, in a way that is spelled out to you from the head coaches, rather. And it also includes the modern NFL offense includes a lot more ground and pound in a diversification of running games. There are not too many teams that run the majority of their rushing concepts out of one system, out of just zone or just gap or just outside zone or just man. Even the Los Angeles Rams, who were very, very heavily man in their blocking schemes for the running game in the 2024 season, diversified it more in 2025. Now, they were still at the top of the list, but they had gone from like over 50% in 2024 to a much more sustainable, manageable number, so that there was a lot more confusion given to the defenses when they see offensive linemen down blocking or blocking in one direction. They're not sure right away if it is a down block or if it's going to be a reach block. And if it's a down block, the run's going typically the opposite direction. And if it is a reach block, it's typically going in the direction that the run is going in the direction that the offensive lineman is stepping. But because with the coverage rotation, so many defenses have gone back to a too-high shell a little bit more, that has lightened the boxes naturally for the running game to really get going. And it hasn't really mattered if the coverage is going to rotate down into a one-high shell, because that safety is already coming in from depth, or that cornerback is already coming in from depth if you are running the ball a little bit more. And it is a constant evolution. The defenses are going to respond next year, and the offenses are going to have their opportunity to adjust in season, and if they can't, then they have the whole offseason to game plan, and it's going to be cyclical. And that is something that I think Cliff Kingsbury needs to learn. He needs to learn from Sean McVay, not necessarily how to make a new system. He doesn't need to learn to use Sean McVay's exact system, but he needs to learn how to better tailor his offense into an evolving NFL year in, year out. And that is something that Sean McVay has really been able to do a lot, especially recently. We've seen the Rams early on in the McVay tenure, especially with Jared Goff, do a lot of play action. And then we saw Matthew Stafford come in, and then it was a lot of spread offense, 4 receiver sets, even empty backfield sets. A lot of the time with Matthew Stafford, he's working from the gun, he's throwing the football quick based on the coverage that he sees. And then it was back to some more play action, and last year again especially, a lot of the man zone or the man concept blocking in the running game. And then this year, diversification of the run game, less shotgun, more under center stuff, more split back stuff. And of course, the thing everybody has been talking about all season is that 13 personnel and finding ways to use that to your advantage. And it seems like Sean McVay is the guy that can get out ahead of the curve on these sorts of things. And it seems like his first couple years of the league, where he had a pretty preordained system, but wasn't able to win a Super Bowl in those first few years, I think that really showed him the ways in which he needed to be constantly adapting his offense in a constantly adapting league. So if there is a way to impute that knowledge now on to Cliff Kingsbury, Sean McVay is going to have a year to try and do just that. Because I think Cliff Kingsbury gets a offensive coordinator gig if he wants it, or gets to go back to college for a head coaching gig if he wants it in 2027. But 2026 is going to be a very pivotal year to see how well Cliff Kingsbury can stay in the NFL, because his offenses, both of his stops, have gotten stale after their first super productive year. And it was even before Jaden Daniels was injured with Washington. There was not a whole lot of the same explosiveness that we saw in 2024, even with Jaden Daniels at quarterback. And the same thing kind of had happened in Arizona with Kyler Murray after his big start to the 2021 season in his third year in the NFL. And Kyler Murray really has not been the same since those first 7 games of 2021. So good for Cliff Kingsbury, a good opportunity for him. A couple of guys deciding not to return to their teams as assistant coaches, and that is the defensive coordinator of the Cleveland Browns, Jim Schwartz, and the offensive line coach of the Philadelphia Eagles in Jeff Stoutland. Both of those are huge. These are guys that even if you hired an offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, or an offensive line coach, I should say, even if you made a change already in this coaching cycle, in this hiring cycle, you might start to second guess yourself and say, oh, maybe the ink hasn't dried just yet, and we can tear up this contract with whoever we originally offered it to run our offensive line, and we can go get the master, the guy who, as a nickname, his training camp with the Eagles, his position group calls it Stoutland U, because he is so smart, he knows how to teach blocking, and he seems to have the magical touch. I mean, just look at Mekhi Becton, who was terrible all throughout his career, comes to Philadelphia for 1 year, looks great, goes to Los Angeles, the Chargers, this past year, after his 1 year in Philadelphia, and is back to being bad again. I can't explain it. I don't have the ins and outs. I've watched Stoutland coaching clinics before, but I don't know the ins and outs of why he is able to develop so well, and then as soon as those guys go away, the development has kind of gone down the pipe, and it's because he's developing these offensive linemen as units and not individual player-to-player basis. So if you can get Jeff Stoutland, if you're one of the luckier teams that already has a head start and maybe still has an offensive line coach vacancy, I would 100% run to the podium to do that, because it seems like the major misgivings that Stoutland had with the Philadelphia Eagles, because this is not him retiring, this is him stepping down from the role. The major misgivings he had was that their new offensive coordinator, Sean Mannion, was going to bring in a lot more of the under center, play action sort of concepts, whereas Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley the last few years under Stoutland have been in these shotgun handoff sort of games instead of under center. And it is different blocking schemes. A lot of the time when you're going from the shotgun, you're going to run a lot of zone runs. And the way in which you protect on the different play actions is also different. So Stoutland's blocking system doesn't necessarily align with Sean Mannion's offensive system and what he wants to bring in. And I don't think there's any bad blood there between the two of them, but I think it is a little bit concerning that that wasn't vetted out during the interview process for Philadelphia, who got turned down by multiple candidates, and maybe this was just the only guy they could find that would take the job in Sean Mannion that at least had some sense of capabilities and competency. Some of those words will get you, But that I would assume that got vetted out, and if it did get vetted out, that, we're going to run a different system here, and our offensive line coach might not like that very much, it's kind of interesting to me that they would choose Sean Mannion over Jeff Stoutland. And it's also worth noting that, again, it is an ever-evolving NFL. Defenses and offenses are changing yearly, and Philadelphia's offense and offensive line didn't always look great in 2025. So maybe there is some stubbornness in Jeff Stoutland, but I would still be really willing to roll the dice on that if I was a team looking for an offensive line coach, or even if I had one already under contract. Minnesota, maybe check if Keith Carter maybe wants to take another year as an assistant, because I would love to have Jeff Stoutland out here. Maybe you can give him to Philadelphia, Keith Carter, and then bring Jeff Stoutland in, and it can be almost like a trade. And then Jim Schwartz, he is definitely in the camp where there is bad blood between him and the team that he is leaving, because he is upset that he got passed over for the head coaching job of the Cleveland Browns. He was one of the final candidates, but it seems like from all reports, he was a distant third out of the top three, whereas Nate Scheelhaase was number one, but he withdrew after figuring out that he would probably have to keep Jim Schwartz as his defensive coordinator. He wanted to have his own guy wherever it was that his first head coaching would be. And also, when you're in your interview and your boss tells you, your prospective boss in Haslam says, yes, if you get this job, you'd have to do this, and this, and you don't have the freedom to build your own staff. And you see kind of the meddling of Haslam and see his past histories of also meddling with the team and meddling with it in a way that is always negative to the Cleveland Browns franchise. I think it was the right move for Nate Scheelhaase to say, I'll wait until I have a less controlling anger. So, probably crosses the Dallas Cowboys off the list and the New York Jets and the Carolina Panthers, of course, from ever being able to get Nate Scheelhaase, who will step up now and be the offensive coordinator of the Los Angeles Rams. And then the guy they gave it to for some reason was Todd Monken, who, again, in that AFC Championship game against the Chiefs, when the run game had been working all season long, they ran 6 times and lost. And maybe part of that was game script, but there also was not really. I think if you only run 6 times, it goes a little bit more past, it was against the game script. We were having to pass a lot because we were down so much. I think running 6 times shows that you never really had true plans to establish the run in that game against the Kansas City Chiefs. But we'll digress from that. We can unpack that more during the offseason, perhaps. But they choose Todd Monken. Todd Monken wanted to keep Jim Schwartz, but Jim Schwartz was mad that he had gotten chosen over. And Jim Schwartz is getting older. I think he's in his 60s. So I would be mad too if I had done such a great job with that defense. The only redeeming thing from the Cleveland Browns this past season, outside of their multiple Pro Bowl quarterbacks on the roster, of course, was the whole defensive unit. They were lights out. I remember they gave up 40-some points to the Baltimore Ravens, but the only time the Baltimore Ravens scored on them was on short fields because the offense was so incompetent that it kept giving Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry 10-yard drives to try and score a touchdown. And you give them enough of those drives, they're going to score enough of those touchdowns, especially as the game wears on. And at the end of the day, I think they still had a good EPA, a positive defensive EPA, which would be a negative EPA overall, because you're subtracting points, expected points from the offense. And they gave up under 300 yards in that game, in which they gave up 40-some points. And just that defensive line was dominant. They were able to confuse Jordan Love, and they basically won that game against the Green Bay Packers by making plays against Jordan Love late in that contest, because Joe Flacco was not moving the football at all in that game. And I think I even said it at the time, the only way that the Browns were winning that game is if they got a drive to start from their opponent's 10-yard line, and sure enough, they did. There was no chance that they were going to go on a drive of more than 30 yards. And, exactly what happens is they get the interception, they get down to the 10-yard line, and the only reason they get to the goal line is because of a iffy pass interference penalty. But that's what Jim Schwartz can do for you. And he led the Lions to the playoffs back when they were in a significant drought, just 3 years removed from an 0-16 season caused by the other guy. He helped right that ship. And yeah, he wasn't able to get them over the hump, but it was a Lions team that consistently seemed to overpromise with the players on its roster and underdeliver with its performances on the field during that era of Lions football. So I would have chosen Jim Schwartz, and I completely get the anger of him resigning. Now, he still is under contract unless the Browns want to, do right by him and release him from his contract. But that means he's going to have to, if that doesn't happen, sit for an entire year. He can't join another team until his contract is up or until they decide to just let him out of it. And they probably have no reason to do that unless they want to just amplify the wrath of Jim Schwartz, and then he goes to like the Cincinnati Bengals next year and picks on them twice a year, every year for the next 2 decades. So those are the possibilities there with Jim Schwartz, but it looks like he was content to just sit the season out rather than being played as the fool with this whole mess of a Cleveland Browns head coaching search that went on this offseason. So Schwartz and Stoutland are out and in. We can't escape him. It is the most boring offensive coordinator in the world, Nathaniel Hackett, who Sean Payton, and obviously it's easy. It's not saying much if Sean Payton says something negative about you and tries to do a dig at you, but very publicly in this instance, Sean Payton, came into the house after Nathaniel Hackett left and said this place is a mess. And now he's going to the Arizona Cardinals to be their offensive coordinator. The only reason that I would see this making sense, just because of his lack of success recently, and the only time he had success with Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, and that probably was more Matt LaFleur than Nathaniel Hackett doing a whole lot. But it makes me think that maybe the Cardinals are going to be in on Aaron Rodgers. You've got Mike LaFleur as the head coach, so you've got the LaFleur connection. You've got Nathaniel Hackett, who Rodgers, for whatever reason, really likes as his play caller. And you've got now an attractive landing spot where it stays nice and warm during the winter, and you can be out of there during the summer months outside of training camp where, yes, you will melt at 115 degrees, even if you are in whatever little dome they have in Tempe or in the State Farm Stadium during the open to the public portions of training camp. So I definitely could see Arizona as a destination for Aaron Rodgers, and that, of course, would put Kyler Murray out of a job. And right now the reports are that there's not a whole lot of interest in anybody trading for Kyler Murray, that it would have to be, the Cardinals would have to include a pick or something in the deal in order to sweeten the pot because of the albatross contract that Kyler Murray currently has. And more likely than not, if Kyler Murray is moved, and he's likely to be moved, it will be via a release, and then he'll get his guaranteed money from the old contract and will be able to sign kind of wherever he wants for whatever he wants. So that is kind of how the dominoes fall in the whole Nathaniel Hackett situation. If it goes in the way that it would be most predictable based on past results, it would be most predictable for Aaron Rodgers to go and be with Nathaniel Hackett once again. But, Pittsburgh's still not out of contention, although I don't think that the Mike McCarthy-Aaron Rodgers relationship had ended on the best of terms, so I'm not sure how realistic it would be if Aaron Rodgers does return, that it would be returning to Pittsburgh. Finally, some other assistant coaching news. Frank Reich is going to be the offensive coordinator of the Jets. He was the head coach of the Colts. He was the head coach of the Panthers. And last year, when the Stanford head coach got usurped because of some more personal stuff, Andrew Luck, who is like the general manager of the Stanford program, asked his old head coach, Frank Reich, if he could come and coach for a season as they tried to kind of get everything fixed in Stanford behind the scenes. So he's going to come back to the NFL and he's going to coach the Jets. And Brian Angelique is going to coach the offensive coordinator position for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was from Minnesota. I cannot tell you much about him, even though I am a huge Vikings fan. I had never heard his name until it was revealed that he was leaving. I do know that our tight ends seem to always be pretty good. Even before, we traded for TJ Hawkinson, they were always punching above their weight. So based on that analysis and that analysis alone, I would say that, yes, that would be a good move, but I think there's a lot more that goes into play that I would not be privy to because I just don't know the guy very much. All right, so that is the staffing changes that have happened since our last show on Tuesday. Let's quickly go through the awards because those happened on Thursday night in the awards show that the NFL has put together. We'll go through the award winners, and I will tell you if the AP got this right or got this wrong. The AP is filled with a mix of dinosaur writers, a mix of new age writers, so you're never going to get the correct opinion because you have different schools of thought all fighting each other. But here we have one school of thought, and that is the school of thought of the Gray Duck. And the Gray Duck will come to a decision, and his decision is right, and his decision is final, and his decision is true and good. And if you question his decision, you are sacrificed to the mighty loon. And that is not a place where you want to be. So I will get the information from the Gray Duck, I will relay it to you, and that information will be completely correct. The assistant coach of the year. Off to a hot start for this segment. The assistant coach for the year, the assistant coach award winner is going to be Josh McDaniels, according to the AP. That is the incorrect answer. He was the offensive coordinator of the New England Patriots. Nobody likes him. And yes, I think he's more carried by Drake Maye in this sense than he was the one doing a lot of the heavy lifting because Drake Maye was making a lot of these same throws last year. It's just now been a cut off of a lot of those mistakes, which I think would be more mental than coaching anyway. So I don't think Josh McDaniels is the deserving winner, but I do think the deserving winner is in that same locker room. And that deserving winner is the interim defensive coordinator, Zach Kerr. And Zach Kerr, having heard his story recently and listening to some other podcasts leading up to the Super Bowl, Chad Graff of The Athletic, I believe it was, who brought this story to kind of everyone's attention, that Zach Kerr had never been even a position coach in the NFL. He had never coordinated stuff anywhere, been a play caller anywhere, designed a defensive system anywhere, and was going to get his feet wet. I mean, the plan is, like, you become a position coach and you kind of see more and more how organizations are run and how successful organizations are run, and probably more importantly, how unsuccessful organizations are run. And that was probably the idea when Zach Kerr was brought on, that he would be there for a couple of years and then, in time, naturally, gradually move up and get promoted to defensive coordinator someday if he was doing his job correctly and keeping good notes. Well, that all changed when Terrell Williams of the New England Patriots, their defensive coordinator, was diagnosed with cancer and had to miss all of the regular season. Kind of right before the start, right in the middle of training camp, I believe it was, is when this was all announced, and kind of close to the start of the regular season. So Zach Kerr designs the defense. He's now in charge. He was the one promoted. And Mike Vrabel, yes, he is a defensive guy, but he's more of the CEO type coach at the NFL level. He doesn't do a whole lot of the strategizing on the defensive side. He kind of just works as a unit with everybody and is just in constant communication and entrusts his coordinators. And they were putting a lot of trust in a coordinator who had zero experience. And it's kind of the opposite of the Peter principle, where the Peter principle is, you're just going to keep getting promoted despite not really showing yourself capable of moving on to a next round of jobs, like being good at one job, but, not very projectable for a future promotion. And you get that promotion anyway. And that's the Peter principle. You just keep getting promoted until eventually you reach the point where you shouldn't have been promoted to that part. And in this case, it was, Zach Kerr hasn't done anything yet, but we're forced to promote him, so let's hope it works out. And it did. And the Patriots defense was constantly adjusting week in, week out. And maybe with the sudden shift there wasn't really time to design a whole defensive system for a guy that has never done defensive play calling. And maybe it was just a necessary thing that they were writing on scratch paper, a defensive plan, game plan, week by week, instead of having one whole philosophy, because the Patriots were blitzing a lot at times, but they were also not blitzing a lot. They were an amoeba. They were a chameleon, blending in to fit whatever matchup worked best, and that is when the Patriots of old were at their best. When Brian Flores and Bill Belichick schemed together for 2 weeks to put together a perfect plan to stop the high-powered Los Angeles Rams defense or offense in the 2018-19 season. They put together a whole new defensive system, but now Zach Kerr's been doing that every single week, and it has crescendoed to a point where throughout this postseason, and yes, it's been against bad offensive lines and a backup quarterback, the bad offensive line not being Denver's. The other ones had the bad offensive lines. Denver was just the backup quarterback because they have probably the best offensive line in the league. But Zach Kerr got the job done, and it has been marvelous in the playoffs. It has been taken to another level. And we'll talk a little bit about it when we hit the preview part of the episode. So for me, all of that would go to giving this award to Zach Kerr. The Offensive Player of the Year, Jackson Smith-Njigba, the wide receiver of the Seattle Seahawks, and that is the correct call. He had the best season of any non-quarterback out there and was rewarded with it. And he had a hot start to the season, and I think any time that you can make a very compelling point by, if someone just watched the film without the numbers and names on it, and you watch just Sam Darnold's film over the last couple of years, and this is not a slight to Justin Jefferson, it is just a point to how good Jackson Smith-Njigba is. You might say, if you were only watching those games, that Jackson Smith-Njigba is the best wide receiver that Sam Darnold has ever played with. I still think that Justin Jefferson is the better wide receiver, but I would say that the rapport that Darnold built with JSN in Seattle is stronger than a pretty strong rapport that he built with Justin Jefferson in Minnesota last year. So yes, give it to Jackson Smith-Njigba. That is the correct call. So saith the Grey Duck. Coach of the Year, also the right call, Mike Vrabel. I'm sure he had a lot of hand in helping Zach Kerr develop as a good defensive coordinator and kind of get him ready for a job that he had been kind of skyrocketed into. So give it to Mike Vrabel. He's also turned that franchise around after their 4-year sabbatical in the desert. And the comeback player of the year, I forgot to write it down, but it was Christian McCaffrey. I was wrong. Aiden Hutchinson, we watched his leg snap in half multiple times on replays. Christian McCaffrey had bilateral leg weakness. He had an injury that was kind of more of a nuisance with the tendonitis, but it wasn't something that takes a super long time to recover from. When your leg is snapped in half in multiple places in front of all of our eyes, and then you come back and are as dominant as Aiden Hutchinson was, and I think relative to the position, Aiden Hutchinson was a more dominant edge rusher than Christian McCaffrey was a running back this season, even though Christian McCaffrey was an excellent running back. To me, Aiden Hutchinson was the correct call, but the Comeback Player of the Year award is one that is just nobody really knows what to expect from it. We had a guy die and come back to life and play football the next season, and he wasn't given the award. All right. Defensive Rookie of the Year is Carson Schwarzenegger, the linebacker from Cleveland. That is the correct call. Carson Schwarzenegger, really, really good. I did not have him super high up my draft board, and I was wrong. He looks good. He did not lack in athleticism like it looked like to me on his tape, and I do apologize, Mr. Schwarzenegger. I was wrong. You were right. I'm stupid. You're smart. And you have proved us all wrong. Now do it again. Protector of the Year. This is the new award. It's the award given to the best offensive lineman. and they gave it to Joe Thuney. And I think that's more of a legacy award, so I can understand it at that point because, yes, Joe Thuney, throughout his career, has just been a versatile, excellent defensive lineman, and maybe when you're introducing an award, you give it to the guy that has been that, so that you're not giving it to a no-name like the guy that I would choose, and that is Aaron Brewer, the excellent center of the Miami Dolphins, if we were just doing this on this year alone. So the Gray Duck is kind of being a little bit vague here, but within the whispers to my ear, he is saying that while it wasn't the correct call, it wasn't necessarily the wrong call because we understand what the NFL AP was trying to do in this instance in the inaugural Protector of the Year award. It was a legacy award. It was Scorsese winning for The Departed. It was Leo winning for The Revenant. He deserved it because of what the bulk of his career had been, and not necessarily just because of this year, which was good. Don't get me wrong. He was good. It just wasn't Aaron Brewer. Offensive Rookie of the Year, Ted McMillan. That is correct. The wide receiver from Carolina, I think, is going to be one of the best players, one of the best receivers in the NFL for the next few years. He's got the size, he's got the hands, and he's got excellent route running, probably better than I've seen for anyone at that sort of size. So it's like Mike Evans, but if he also got really, really good separation all the time. So that is Tech McMillan. I think he went over 1,000 yards and really helped Bryce Young develop, and probably was a major reason in why Bryce Young was able to get Carolina to the playoffs and also get that fifth-year option picked up. Defensive Player of the Year, Myles Garrett. Yep, the Gray Duck didn't even say anything to me on that one. The Gray Duck expected me to know that this was the right answer without having his guidance, and yes, that is the right answer. You set the sack record, and you become so dominant. I think it was a wire-to-wire win for Myles Garrett. I don't think there was any moment during the season that you thought it wasn't going to be Myles Garrett. Maybe Micah Parsons snuck in there, and while I think Micah Parsons is on a tier of his own, separated from the pack of edge rushers, I think that there is another tier even above that in which a player is on his own, and that is Myles Garrett. And then the MVP, Matthew Stafford, that's incorrect. It was Drake Maye. It was right in front of you. That was an easy one. You watch the film, it's Drake Maye. You look at the numbers, it's Drake Maye. You look at the team around him, it's Drake Maye. I don't know how Matthew Stafford won this award, outside of it being a legacy award, but because the MVP is not a legacy award, because it's not in its first year or its last year, we are going to penalize the MVP, which was probably sponsored by Immortal Chambers, or whatever it was that fixed his back and apparently made him Superman. But you watch Drake Maye and what he's able to do, and for me, it always comes down to not how would this team look without this player, because every team is going to look bad without their starting quarterback. It is, if these two guys switched places, hypothetically, would they have the same level of success as their counterpart? So if Drake Maye was with the Rams, would the Rams be a better offense than Matthew Stafford, and vice versa? And I think the Patriots would be a better offense with Drake Maye, and the Rams would be a better offense with Drake Maye. Good thing about hypotheticals is you can never be wrong because they don't happen. So, unless we get the whole quantum timeline figured out and realize that there's a ton of other timelines, and zero of them are in the one where Drake Maye and Matthew Stafford switched sides, it was Matthew Stafford that got the better of him with the Patriots offense, and then that would prove me wrong. But because it is a hypothetical, and because we have not advanced to that point of quantum physics, I can declaratively say that Drake Maye would be better in the Los Angeles Rams offense than Matthew Stafford was, and Drake Maye was better in the New England Patriots offense than Matthew Stafford would have been this year. So Drake Maye should have been the MVP, all that to say. They also announced the Hall of Fame winners yesterday, or the Hall of Fame entrants, and it's weird because maybe I am wrong about this, but in the past it's been 5 modern guys can get in. And essentially what it has been is you go from the 15 modern finalists down to 10, then down to 5, and typically within the room it's a yes-no vote on each of those 5 players. And for the most part, I believe it's always been 5 modern candidates, and then whoever the Veterans Committee selected. And the Veterans Committee selected Roger Craig, so unless he is one of those 5 candidates, and you couldn't go more than that, I assumed he was not one of the modern candidates because he was being voted on a different ballot. And maybe I'm wrong about that, because otherwise, why would you only vote in the 4? That list of Hall of Famers, the finalists, you could probably say that every single one of those guys should get into the Hall of Fame and will get into the Hall of Fame eventually. So once they get into that final 5, it seems kind of superfluous to say no, to keep them on the ballot another year. But the 4 modern guys that got in, Drew Brees, Larry Fitzgerald, first-time guys, Luke Kuechly, second-time guy, just like Pat Willis got in a second time, and then Adam Vinatieri, the kicker. No problem with any of those. I predicted all 4 of those, and then I also predicted a 5th one in Kevin Williams. Drew Brees, one of the best quarterbacks of all time, and he got to be even more successful and put up even more video game numbers in a Sean Payton system. Larry Fitzgerald, tremendous wide receiver, former ball boy as well in the NFL with the Minnesota Vikings when they had Randy Moss and Chris Carter. Where do you think he learned how to become a wide receiver from? It was them, obviously, even though he was in high school at the time and was already a big recruit when he was the ball boy. But we will run with that narrative because there's always something in the water of the 10,000 lakes. You can get baptized in the waters of Lake Minnetonka, as Prince would say if he was with us today. Larry Fitzgerald, outstanding hands. The 2008 playoff run probably could have gotten him into the Hall of Fame alone, where he was getting 3 touchdown games on the daily and leading a 9-7 Cardinals team to the brink of a Super Bowl win while going up against one of the better Steelers teams that we've ever seen from the winningest Super Bowl franchise, tied with the Patriots at 6, that we've ever seen. Luke Kuechly, no doubter. The only thing about him was that his star did not shine for very bright, but when it did, it was a supernova. Any astronomers watching this, if a supernova is not a very, very bright star, please let me know, because what I am wanting to say is that he shined very, 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 very bright. So I really like him going in, and kind of follows the same story, same process as it was for Patrick Willis, who also shined very, very bright for 7 or 8 years and made it into the Hall of Fame, not after his first time on the ballot, but after his second time, maybe as like a weird form of punishment for only playing a couple of years and stepping away while he was at his height. But Luke Kuechly was the best linebacker in the league throughout his entire career and is well-deserving of the Hall of Fame. And then Adam Vinatieri, the most clutch kicker in NFL history, certainly deserves it. Couple of Super Bowl game-winning kicks at the buzzer, kicks in the snow, in a windy snowstorm that went through, that started the Patriots dynasty against the Raiders, along with the help of an archaic rule that was still in place at the time, which we will not mention, in case we have any Oakland Raiders fans here. But Adam Vinatieri, well-deserved. And then Roger Craig, who basically was the only reason I would say, I don't like this, is because it should have been Bill Belichick. Or Bill Belichick should have also been here because he was up, and Roger Craig was not a better running back than Bill Belichick was a head coach, but Roger Craig was excellent. He was like the original Marshall Faulk with the 1,000 rushing yards, 1,000 receiving yards. And even though he only had a couple of seasons where he went over 1,000 yards on the ground, almost every one of his seasons, yard for scrimmage, which is receiving yards added to rushing yards, it was over 1,300 year in and year out. So excellent job by him. And he is a former Minnesota Viking as well, albeit at the tail end of his career and not at all during his prime when he was actually good. That was with the 49ers. So the only question I have is why, I have two. Why is Bill Belichick not in there? Why didn't you just break the rules? It's your Hall of Fame. You can do kind of whatever you want with it, Canton. Just let him in on the first ballot just because the voters are dummies. And then also, why was there no modern fifth if, in fact, there was no modern fifth if Roger Craig does not count in the modern class? Which, again, I'm still not 100% sure if that is the case or not. All right, let's get into it. It is the Super Bowl. The greatest game every single year. I mean, last year wasn't great. It was a blowout. But the event, the spectacle, we've got Bad Bunny, unless you're an idiot. And we've also got Drake Maye and Sam Darnold both facing off for their first Super Bowl title. One of them will get it, and one of them will not. But they are both going to have ample opportunities, I believe, to put themselves in position in years to come as well. Right now, the Seattle Seahawks are minus 4.5 point favorites. They are minus 245. There was some worry that Nick Emmanwori would not be able to play in this game. The sensational rookie safety, which was probably Carson Schwarzenegger's only real competition that I can think of there's probably more guys, but off the top of my head, because it's in my brain right now, probably the only real competition for Carson Schwarzenegger for Defensive Rookie of the Year. He was a full participant, Emmanwori, so he should be good to go. Drake Maye was also on the injury report. I don't think he was ever even a limited participant. I think it was always full. He's good to go. So Seahawks fans, Patriots fans, wiping some sweat off the brow. That is the first battle that you have had to overcome, and by God, you've done it. You've overcome that battle. The injury report that is under more scrutiny than it is at any other time. Now you just got to make sure that your center does not go out partying and go missing the night before the Super Bowl, like what happened with the Oakland Raiders in the 2002-03 season. Of course, this game is a rematch of the greatest Super Bowl of all time, or one of the greatest Super Bowls of all time. 11 years ago in Glendale, the Seahawks were up 24-14 in the fourth quarter. Tom Brady, against the Legion of Boom defense, scores 2 touchdowns or leads 2 touchdown drives in the fourth to take the lead in just incredible poise, an incredible presence, throw after throw after throw when you're going up against Richard Sherman and really a historic Seattle Seahawks defense. That might have been the best of the 2010s. But Tom Brady got the job done, and still Russell Wilson had a chance. He throws a deep ball heave to Jermaine Kearse, who makes an Antonio Freeman, he did what? Sort of catch on the sideline. It gets them down to the 5-yard line with a minute left. They're in control of the clock. They have some timeouts. They run it once with Marshawn Lynch from the 5. He gets them down to the 1. Clock is running out. There's under 30 seconds left. We just saw Marshawn Lynch dominate, despite everybody knowing that he was getting the ball on that last play. Of course, he's going to be able to do it again. They're going to give the ball to Marshawn Lynch. Here we go. They're snapping the ball. They're not giving it to Marshawn Lynch. What the hell is going on? He's throwing a pass, and it's intercepted by Malcolm Butler, and the Patriots dynasty has been renewed. People forget there was a 10-year run there where the Patriots had not won a Super Bowl from 2004 until that Malcolm Butler play in 2014. And then they won 3 more. Well, I guess 2 more after winning 2014. And Tom Brady won 3 more after winning in 2014. So, as bad as it has been for the Patriots for the last 3 years or whatever, if they were to win this game against the Seahawks, the drought between their last title and this title would be smaller, shorter than the drought between titles within their own overarching 20-year-long dynasty. So, if they win, it's back to the mountaintop. They had less downtime in terms of pure NFL champions than they did within the Brady dynasty. So good for them. Let's talk about some of these keys to win for the Super Bowl, what the Seahawks need to do and what the Patriots need to do, and then I will tell you what I think out of those scenarios wins out. If I am the Seattle Seahawks on offense, one of the things they did early on against the Rams that I think not only set the tone and the vibe for a game against the Rams, but also manipulated the Rams' coverage throughout the rest of the game was isolating Rashid Shaheed on one side of the formation, knowing a lot of teams will do match coverages in either quarters or palms, and that typically the rules for that match those match zone systems are that if you have only one wide receiver on one side of the field, it is man-to-man no matter what. Man all day is one of the terms used for it. And that was the case when Rashid Shaheed, early in the game, was isolated against Darius Williams, and Rashid Shaheed burned him. And there was no help over the top because the safety was looking over at a crosser, which is his responsibility. The weak side safeties, it's his first responsibility to look for a crosser so that he can cut it off coming from the opposite side of the field. And then if there isn't one, to backtrack and go help the man all day defender. And if the Patriots, which they do, use a lot of these split field coverages, you can see how they're going to respond to that early by taking one of those shots to Rashid Shaheed again. And in the Rams game, what that did was allowed a lot of open space over the middle because the Rams knew that no matter what, they could not put anyone one-on-one against the super speedster that is Rashid Shaheed. There always needed to be safety help. And so if you have Rashid Shaheed on the outside, you're taking a cornerback over there, and now a safety is forced to play more towards the sideline, and you've got much more space in the middle of the field to work with, and that's where Jackson Smith-Njigba is able to thrive. And so that set up Jackson Smith-Njigba, who didn't need the extra help, to have extra help by having a wide open middle of the field and just taking advantage of it all night long until they finally decided to bracket him while also doubling Rashid Shaheed, meaning everyone else was in one-on-one, and anytime that you had to blitz, if you wanted it to be effective, you had to give a pretty obvious blitz look that was hard to disguise. So then Sam Darnold knew all night long what he was going to see from the Rams, and he took advantage of it. So if I am the Seattle Seahawks, I am going to try and see if I can have that same sort of plan unravel in the first game. Now, he would go one-on-one against a much better corner, whether it is Christian Gonzalez or Carlton Davis III. But see if they are going to put him one-on-one. See if they are going to keep a safety over on top. See if they're going to go match. Or see if they're just going to spot drop their zone coverages. Patriots run a lot of one-high shells. What are effective one-high shells? Maybe pre-snap they can sometimes look at like two high shells, but they will rotate into a one-high shell a lot of the time. So if they do that and if they play a lot more cover 3, I think it makes it a little bit harder to get those same sort of advantages because that cornerback is playing a deep third no matter what in those instances. So he's already going to be backtracking and he's not going to give up any vertical leverage. So if you're the Patriots, you counteract that by playing a lot of cover 3. And that also helps you against the run game to slow down the Seahawks run game because you only have one high safety. You don't even have to disguise. Just play straight up cover 3. I'm getting ahead of myself because I'm telling the Patriots what to do, and I'm supposed to be just telling the Seahawks what to do. So you see how the Patriots respond when they isolate Rashid Shaheed. And then after that, early on in the game, tempo offense, quick offense. I think without Zach Charbonnet, it becomes harder to get to inside zone, which is what the Seahawks use a lot of Zach Charbonnet. They use a lot of Kenneth Walker in outside zone and a lot of Zach Charbonnet in the inside zone, and that's because for outside zone, it's a lot easier for the running back to read, and Kenneth Walker is not always great at reading the holes. For him, it simplifies it. He's an explosive runner, and he's gotten better at it, but for him, it simplifies it to just reading outside in. If the first tackle or tight end on the side that I'm running to in outside zone was able to successfully get across the face of his defender and seal off the outside edge, then I'm bouncing it to the outside. If he was not able to do that, then I'm looking to say, is he getting pushed back, or is he getting or is he getting the push while having the inside leverage? If he's getting the push while having the inside leverage, okay, I bang it into the right behind him, right behind his back. If he's not the one getting the push, then I have to cut it back across the formation. It's like 3 options and puts Kenneth Walker in the best place to succeed. The problem is the New England Patriots defense is one of the best against outside zone runs this year. And so now you're going to be forcing a lot of Kenneth Walker to the inside zone runs, or just be stubborn and hope that he's able to find the right, or that hope that outside zone is able to find some more, that they're able to spread out the Patriots defense a little bit more and Kenneth Walker is able to find some room, or go to more inside zone, which the Patriots are more susceptible to giving up big gains in. And then you're forcing Kenneth Walker to have to press one hole to get the linebackers to attack that hole and then have him bounce it out. And Kenneth Walker just likes to bounce it out, so the linebackers are always going to be ready for that bounce out and not really give any leeway when he presses the inside hole. So I think you want to establish a slider box so that you have more room later on in the game to run those outside zones and maybe have a better chance of taking advantage of a Patriots defense that maybe is not giving up or is kind of getting gashed up by the passing game, which is what I think you hope for if you are Sam Darnold and the Seattle Seahawks, is these quick 3-step drops, ball is out. 3-step drops, ball is out. The reason for that we'll talk about in a second when we get to the Patriots and what one of their keys is going to be. On defense, I would like to see the Seahawks run a lot of man coverage. And the reason for this, they've been a primarily split field team in the playoffs so far. The Rams were able to at times manipulate the coverage rules, the match coverage rules, in order to get open receivers against Seattle. And Seattle played more man in that game than they had prior when they crushed San Francisco with pretty much only a 2-high split field set. But I think it's a different animal running man against the Rams than it is against the Patriots, because I think there is a distinct advantage, cornerback to wide receiver, matchup to matchup, that favors the Seattle Seahawks with Devon Witherspoon and, Stephon Diggs, with Nick Emanwari and Stephon Diggs, with Witherspoon or Tariq Woolen or Josh Jobe against Kayshon Boutte or Demario Douglas. I think that is a distinct advantage if you are going to choose man-on-man. And I think if you go split field a lot, as most teams do, or at least don't, I think Josh McDaniels is good enough to try and take advantage of that. And much like Sean McVay did 2 weeks before, manipulate your coverages so that he can get Drake Maye an open receiver. But if you are playing man, scheme does not matter. All that matters is execution. And yeah, you might give up a big play. And yeah, you might be susceptible to Drake Maye getting out on the run because cornerbacks have their backs turned. But I think it gives you the best chance. Another reason for this is because within the defensive matrices of this year, the Seattle Seahawks are often highly separated from their wide receivers within the split field system, where the coverage has kind of broken down and the pressure has made up for it. And some of that is because it is a zone system, so you're just naturally, at the point of the ball being out, you're going to have guys that are more standing in zones and kind of covering players in a match, but also watching the quarterback. So they might be a little bit behind, but they're still able to make the play. I don't know if that always translates, though. Their average yards of separation is higher than almost any other team in the NFL. And if you are playing man coverage, you can limit that. So that is what I think the Seahawks need to do. They also need to maintain good gap discipline and really rush with an idea to contain him. Maybe even put a spy on Drake Maye with Ernest Jones or Tyree Snyder or somebody, because Drake Maye and his legs are lethal, as we saw against the Denver Broncos in the snow to win the game on third and long, fourth and long. I believe it was third and long. That is going to be key, which means that if you are an edge rusher, you are not the one with the two-way go. And I think that works for Seattle. And what a two-way go is that when you're rushing 4 against a typical offensive line setup, there are, 1, the gap outside the tackle, the gap between tackle and guard, between guard and center, and then guard and center, tackle and guard, outside the tackle. 6 different gaps. And if you're rushing 4, you're able to take up 4 of those gaps. So you give 2 of those guys, usually 1, but sometimes 2, the ability to choose which gap they want to take. So a lot of times it's a good edge rusher. Myles Garrett will be able to rush either to the outside or the inside, or maybe he changes his mind mid-rush, and that's fine too, because he is not going into another player's gap, to another teammate's gap, and then now you have 2 guys in one gap, and you already have a disadvantage in the gap numbers unless you're bringing extra rushers. So I think in this case, you do not want to give your edge rushers, whoever it is, even if you're blitzing, whoever the farthest one on the edge is, I do not think you want to give them the two-way go. I think you want them attacking the outside the tackle gap every single time so that it is much more difficult for Drake Maye to get free. I also think that allows Byron Murphy, it allows Leonard Williams on the inside to have a really good chance to win, because now they are not limited to just attacking one gap, but one of them is going to have the two-way go a lot of the time. And both of those guys can win one-on-one matchups. So you want to make sure you are pass rushing with contain and that the inside pressure has the two-way goes in this system so that Drake Maye cannot get out of the pocket. And if the Seahawks can do that, they're giving themselves a good chance to win. And they're already the favorites. For the Patriots, as we move on here, on offense, I want their first drive of the game to look like their first drive of the third quarter against Denver. You're going to be dealing with a Seattle defense that is hungry to rush the passer, and that's also good at stopping the run. But I want you to try and disrupt that with a quick passing game. The first play out of the third quarter was screen, screen, screen. In that first game in the first half, New England played right into a hungry defense's plan and threw the ball a lot, didn't run it, and got Drake Maye into a lot of trouble. Then they came out, changed up the whole game plan on third down, or in the third quarter, got Drake Maye out, got him out of pressure by just having him throw screens and then running the football a lot. And the one time he was pressured, he made a big run on the ground, and they were able to take what was eventually the game-winning field goal on the first drive of that third quarter. And it's going to be hard to establish that run game because the Seattle Seahawks defense has been good against the run with a stack box, without a stack box. Nickel personnel, base personnel, dime personnel, doesn't matter. They are good. All of their personnel groupings are effective at stopping the run. Still, do it early so that Drake Maye does not feel pressure early and avoids making a colossal, disastrous mistake, which Cam Newton had a few of in that game against the Broncos, also in San Francisco, in the Super Bowl, the 2015-16 season, 10 years ago. Because I think this game is going to play out a lot like that game, if I'm being honest with myself. In that I think if you are not getting, or I think you're going to get a lot of stops on defense for both of these teams, so you don't want to make major mistakes on offense because that makes the opposing offense's job easier if you do make colossal mistakes. You are more willing here to wave the white flag and not play C.J. Stroud ball from the divisional playoffs. Kind of more of an old school mentality, but I think in this case it would be effective. And one way to try and counteract how good Seattle's run defense is let's introduce a lot more zone read for Drake Maye in this game. Let's try to catch the Seahawks reacting a little bit more. They're good at it. They can react well. But try to get them to overreact. You have a quarterback that can run a lot of read option. He's powerful. He's fast. And it's the last game of the season. Put all your cards on the table. Get that read option going. And that can set you up for success the rest of the way. Kind of like Colin Kaepernick's read option against the Green Bay Packers in the 2012-13 divisional round was able to do. Because now once you have the defense doubting itself as to who has the football or who's going to get the football between the running back, whether it's Ramondre Stevenson or Travion Henderson in the backfield, or the quarterback, who is also a very good runner, you're going to catch them at times guessing. And if they guess wrong, it's an explosive play on the ground. So you are hunting explosives in this game because I don't think you're going to be able to sustain drives against the Seattle Seahawks defense. And the good news is I think that New England can get those explosives because they've gotten those explosives all year long at a league-leading rate. One of the ways they can get those explosives, and it ties back to Seattle's strengths and weaknesses on defense, and specifically with their defensive coverages. And that is that they are able to get pressure quickly, but within this matrix, it showed that they gave up a lot of yards of separation between the opponent wide receivers and the nearest defender to those wide receivers. So you can have some coverage breaks. And you can manipulate your way into some coverage breaks. And yes, the pressure is going to get there, but you have Drake Maye, who is excellent at getting out of the pocket. He can do a lot of the Josh Allen stuff when it is extend the play, get out, and throw it downfield. And if you get a couple of those big shots in this game, in a game that I think is going to be a defensive showdown, that might be enough to give you the advantage. And that's why you want to make sure you are not making the colossal mistake by kind of sticking to a more conventional, old-school, conservative game plan on the offensive side of the football. And hope that the run game is able to give you some holes to work with. And that maybe you can sustain some drives, but I wouldn't count on it. I would be hunting for those big plays with the read options, with the rollouts, and taking advantage of broken coverages that I think you'll probably get at one point. But in order to make it easier for Drake Maye to get on that rollout, you need on every true pass set, true drop back, so not play action, not a screen, not a one-step dropping out. On every true drop back, you need to dedicate one, maybe even two extra guys to help alleviate some of the pressure. You need Ramondre Stevenson and Travion Henderson staying in the backfield. You need Hunter Henry chipping at the line of scrimmage. Or just blocking and double teaming DeMarcus Lawrence. Because then Drake Maye can see the pocket develop, get a good feel for it, and try to find an escape lane to the outside. And then it's schoolyard ball. And the Patriots can get someone open. And I think there is a distinct advantage here for New England in that they've never had the big name wide receivers throughout the season. So it doesn't matter if good cornerbacks are going up against them, because on paper, pretty much every cornerback unit you would think has the advantage against the Patriots wide receiving core. And that always hasn't played out. It doesn't always play out on paper. or it doesn't always play out on the field as you would think on paper. But New England's offense has been explosive despite that. So it doesn't matter that the Seahawks have the major advantage, because the Patriots offense has been able to be explosive when other teams have had the advantage against their wide receivers. So I think a well spread out, well executed game plan could really favor New England against a very, very good Seahawks defense. And then on defense for New England, I think there's a good chance for them to have an advantage as well. And that is because there's a weak link on this Seattle offense, and his name is Anthony Bradford. He is their right guard, and Anthony Bradford gave up 8 pressures in 40 dropbacks. 8 pressures alone were caused by him, which is the most this season for Bradford. He's coming off his worst game, and you have 2 electric interior defensive pass rushers that can take advantage of that. And one who in this very game a year ago was able to take advantage of some not so good interior defenders or interior offensive linemen. So I think you have Milton Williams and Christian Barmore pick on Anthony Bradford all night long. And the Patriots do a lot of stunts, almost as much as anybody in the league, I think at 25%. And that's one way to confuse him, but I think you can also just win one-on-one against Anthony Bradford. And just give those guys rotations against him. A tag team, WWE, old school wrestling sort of bout, where you're the only one that has the tag team, and the other guy doesn't, and he's constantly lunging, and he's constantly trying to cement himself and anchor himself, but is unable to do so. Because when Milton Williams and Christian Barmore have been on the field together in pass rushing dropbacks, they have generated, or the Patriots have generated, as a team with those 2 guys on the field together, a pressure rate of over 40%, which would be the highest in the NFL. So that is a significant matchup advantage, because now Darnold has to get the ball out quick, and Darnold's inability to handle that interior pressure is what cost Minnesota a chance to beat Los Angeles in the playoffs a couple of years ago. And we haven't really seen him have to face that interior pressure to a strong degree in these playoffs just yet. So Milton Williams, do what you did last Super Bowl. Christian Barmore, do what you've done all season. And now do it against one of the weakest right guards in the NFL. Against the run, against the pass, it doesn't matter. Take him to school. And this game could get ugly, and you could be the one to force the Seahawks and Sam Darnold to make the catastrophic mistake that will swing the game. We also mentioned that the Patriots are good against outside zone, and the Seahawks are going to try to run a lot of outside zone, and now that's going to leave them in a predicament, because you can go to inside zone, which Kenneth Walker is not as good at. You can try it with George Holani, who does not have a ton of snaps this season and was coming off an injury, or maybe he had just been elevated from the practice squad in that game against the Rams. I'm not exactly sure. But you're not going to trust him with a boatload of inside zone carries. And if you are the Seahawks, we've talked about it, you want to establish the ground game so that the best play-action passer can be at his best in play-action. And we've talked about how the correlation with play-action success is not with running success, but it's with running quantity. You can have 1 yard, 1 yard, 1 yard, 1 yard, 1 yard, 1 yard runs throughout the game, but if you put enough runs together, play action is still going to be successful. More so than if you had 3 runs of 6 yards or whatever. If you had 10 runs of 2 yards versus 3 runs of 6 yards, the play action would be more successful throughout the rest of the game with the 10 runs of 2 yards. So you're making Clint Kubiak make a decision if it goes according to your plan and your outside zone defense is successful. And that decision is, do I keep running the ball regardless so that I can get to play action? But then early in the game, I'm going to be putting Sam Darnold in second and third and long situations in obvious passing downs, where now Milton Williams and Christian Barmore are licking their lips and salivating at the chance to try and put Anthony Bradford on his back again, or Jalen Sundell on his back, and getting the pressure quickly and forcing Sam Darnold to make a mistake, with the hope that you're able to block it up enough that Darnold doesn't make the mistake, and hope that the play action as the game goes on is able to come into effect. The other decision that Clint Kubiak, or the other choice that Clint Kubiak would have, is to abandon the run and then abandon play action and give more true pass sets to Anthony Bradford against Milton Williams and Christian Barmore. And it's a lose-lose scenario for the New England Patriots. Or a lose-lose scenario for Seattle, yeah. Because I think no matter what they do, the advantage still goes to Barmore and Milton Williams. And I think that is going to be too much for Seattle to overcome. I think that is going to play such a key role, is what Barmore and Williams are able to do to the Seattle interior, that it allows New England to come away with this one without giving up a whole lot of points. And they win this one 21-10. They get a couple of those big play runs by Drake Maye. They get a couple of those deep shots when the play is broken down in the schoolyard ball. Maybe a catastrophic mistake by Sam Darnold. Kenneth Walker never able to get going, and the New England Patriots win this one 21-10. That is my pick for the Super Bowl champion. In this scenario, I guess my MVP would probably be Drake Maye, because he scores like one rushing touchdown and has 2 long passing touchdowns. And if you get a quarterback that can do that, then he's going to win the MVP more often than not, or the Super Bowl MVP more often than not. And then the other guys that would be in play there, I think, would be Milton Williams and or Christian Barmore, depending on who had more success against Anthony Bradford, kind of a la Von Miller with the Denver Broncos 10 years ago. This game is going to be played a lot during the day, so it's going to have a weird vibe because it's on the West Coast and it's an outdoor game. I remember 10 years ago when they had the halftime show, it was still daylight out. So that made it a weird vibe. So hopefully the sun is set a little bit to help out with the vibe. Hopefully Bad Bunny is able to crush it. Hopefully nobody's watching Kid Rock. Why would you? And hopefully it's just some good football and is a great way to wrap up the 2025 season. Congratulations to the 2025-26 world champion New England Patriots. The dynasty is back. Drake Maye is here. But Seattle, you'll have your chance next year. We'll have a chance to break down all of the action from Sunday's game. We'll be back either late Sunday night or early Monday morning to give you the rundown here on the Grey Duck NFL Show.